Well, hello and welcome to this installment of the four-part series as to why Christians believe the Bible. This is sponsored by the East Park Church of Christ. My name is Steve Cordell. I'm the minister for the church, and if you happen to be in the Danville area, if you live here, or if you're just passing through, we'd like to invite you to join us for our Sunday morning Bible classes at 9:30 a.m., followed by a worship time at 10:30 a.m. We meet at 1224 East Voorhees Street in Danville, and then on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock, we meet on the first and third Sundays with some small groups at the building. And then on the second and fourth Sundays, we have a traditional service with preaching and singing and the sort of things that you would normally expect to find at a Sunday service. And then on the first and third Sundays, we also have a small group that meets right after services at noontime. And then Wednesday evenings, we have a midweek Bible study with classes for all ages, just like on Sunday morning. Our classes are for all ages, starting with the youngest and going on up to the oldest. Give us a call at 217-442-2386, and we'll give you more information about the classes. They do change from time to time, so rather than go into detail about what each class is, just give us a call and we'll tell you what our current offerings are, or you can email us at eastparkcfc@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Just click on the subscribe bar. When the notification bell pops up, click on it. You'll be notified anytime we add content to the channel. Comment on these videos, like these videos, share these videos, send us your questions. If you have a question about something in one of the videos, or if you see a text or a topic while you're reading your Bible you'd like to know about, to it. And now let's get on with it. In our last two sessions, we looked at, first of all, the endorsement of Jesus Christ as to why we believe the Bible. That Jesus said the prophets, the law, and the Psalms all pointed to him. And in the Hebrew Bible, that's basically the breakdown of how they classify the various books of the Old Testament. And then Peter and Paul also gave their endorsement of the Old Testament. We looked at that. And then we looked at the record of fulfilled prophecy in our second installment. So today we're going to look at the third reason why Christians believe the Bible, and that is the manuscript evidence. And that is important because when you consider the age of all the books of the Bible and when they were written, the manuscript evidence of the Bible is pretty strong, and it is stronger than any other literature from ancient times, and I'll go into more about that here in just a minute. But we have to remember the Bible is not just one book written by one author. It's actually, and by author I'm talking human authors. God is the ultimate author of the Bible, but he used humans to communicate what he wanted us to know. And the Bible is really a library of 66 books. The great thing about it is that it's portable. We can pick it up just like this and take it wherever we want to go. And with technology, you might even have a Bible on your phone, or more than one. I've got several Bible programs and study guides here on my phone, plus on the laptop computer that I'm using to make this video with. So we've got lots of opportunities to read the Bible and study the Bible, and a lot of these Bible apps can be had free through the various Google stores, or is it the Apple store, or whatever it is. I don't have Mac products, and so you can find a lot through there too, as well as out on the market. Logos and BibleSoft are two other resources you might go to for Bible study materials, and about 40 different people wrote the Bible in all, that were used by God to communicate it. Years ago, I saw an episode of the old Phil Donahue show, for those who remember it, and they were discussing something Bible related. I don't even really remember what it was, but I remember an audience member asked Phil Donahue, do you believe the Bible to be the Word of God? And he just said, well, I believe it was written by four men. You know, I'm assuming he was referring to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but he was off in his estimation by how many men wrote the Bible. And this is kind of what it would look like if we put it out as a library in each individual book. 66 books in all, written over about 1,400 years, 40 different authors, 3 continents, 13 countries. And yet it all comes together in one piece of literature. It comes together with a central theme, that is pointing man back to God. And these 40 men, this is one of the other reasons, and maybe this might be another video, but one of the reasons I see the inspiration in the Bible is because God did not do things the way we humans would do it. He didn't go to the university to get scholars, or to the capitals of the world to get politicians, or go to the whatever the Wall Street was back in those days and get businessmen. He got people from all kinds of different walks of life, different occupations. There are kings, there are princes, there are soldiers, there are farmers, there are shepherds, there's tax collectors, there's fishermen, there's those like Saul of Tarsus, very highly educated, and then there's the disciples who are probably no more than an average education. There's a lot of speculation about that, and we really don't know what education they had, but they had some kind of basic education, at least I believe that. And then because the Bible is a book, it was initially made up of manuscripts. And it is the number of manuscripts that we have today that helps lend to its credibility. Now, we don't have what are called the autographs. The autographs would be the actual manuscripts that the authors wrote. So in other words, we don't have the original writing that Paul wrote down on the papyrus. We don't have the clay tablets going way back to Genesis and Exodus and those. We don't have the originals. What we have are copies. And the more copies we have, the better we can compare between them and know what should be in a given document. And this ends up being like a situation, let's say, for instance, there's 4 or 5 of us that are standing on a street corner or on opposite corners, and there's a car accident. Now, would you expect all 4 of us or 5 of us, however many there are, to tell the same story with the same words in the same way? Well, we wouldn't. If you're standing on the northeast corner and I'm standing directly across from you, we're going to see it a little different. If I was maybe fooling with my cell phone for a minute and I heard the screeching tires and I look up, but you were watching the intersection the whole time, we're going to see different perspectives. And we see different perspectives with the different writers, particularly in the 4 Gospels. Now, as we're going into this, something we need to consider is that when God inspired the Bible through the Holy Spirit, this doctrine comes up of verbal plenary inspiration. It's kind of a mouthful, but what we mean by that is verbal, obviously that's our voice, our words. Plenary means complete or total inspiration. So what we're saying is the very words were inspired. God didn't just give them thoughts or concepts and come up with your own way of communicating it. God gave them the words. He did allow room for their personal writing styles and things like that. Paul and Peter have very different style. I have a different style than other writers that I know. So God gave them the words, but did allow for their style. And remember, you cannot have words, or have thoughts rather, unless you have words. Thoughts have to be put into words to be communicated, just like music needs notes, or math needs numbers. So I want to show you some manuscripts and some fragments of some of these manuscripts. And a lot of this information comes from the website SeanMcDowell.org. He is Josh McDowell's son, and those of you who are on the college campus scene in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s might remember Josh McDowell. He was with, I believe it was Campus Crusade for Christ, and he did a lot of work with Christian evidences and with apologetics. Now, he's got some areas doctrinally, like how to become a Christian and that, where he's off. But when it comes to his apologetics work, he's very hard to beat. His book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and its subsequent editions has sold millions of copies, and it's a pretty thorough book. It's pretty good to give to people who are thinking about the Christian faith, or maybe are new Christians. I have it in my library. It's actually on this laptop computer, a digital copy. I don't have the paper and ink anymore, but it would be a good gift for someone who's just becoming a Bible student, or even if you've been a Christian for a long time. I still would recommend getting Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Now, on this website, we see some manuscripts and information about them. And one of the things to keep in mind is the number. The more manuscripts, the merrier. Greek manuscripts we have, and this includes fragments and full manuscripts, 5,856 as of 2018. The earliest one is AD 130. That's the John Ryland papyrus. I'm going to have more to say about that in just a minute. There's also some non-Greek manuscript, the Armenians and Latin manuscripts, over 18,000 of them. And as you can see, we've got almost 24,000 total manuscripts of the New Testament. And this is the John Rylands papyrus that was mentioned on that list, dating from about AD 130. This might be the oldest manuscript, either fragment or in whole, that we have. That goes back several years, and there's at least one other one that could be older than this. I'm going to show you that one here in just a minute. But papyrus, remember, is a material. It's like a thick paper. In fact, our word paper comes from this word. It was used as far back as 3200 BC by the Egyptians. And it can also, the term papyrus can refer to documents that are written on the sheets of this material. And a lot of times it was rolled up into a scroll. And when Jesus, for instance, went into the temple and they handed him the scroll of Isaiah and he opened it up, that is the sort of thing that it was typically put on. Some of it could have been bound, is my understanding of it, and I'm doing that from memory. And this particular fragment is about the size of a credit card or a debit card. And on the front side, it's John chapter 18, verses 31 to 33. And on the back, it's verses 38 and 39. And so that's about 3.5 by 2.5 inches, roughly. Like I say, the size of a credit card or a debit card. Now, one of the reasons that this is important is there is a theory going around that the Gospel of John was not written until well into the 2nd century. But if we have a copy of it here that dates from, like I say, around AD 135, then that would show convincingly that the Gospel itself of John's, or his account of the Gospel, had to have existed before this fragment was produced. So, and this fragment, by the way, was found in Egypt. So by AD 135, Christianity had spread from Jerusalem. We know there was a big dispersion from Acts chapter 8. And so this would have gotten into Egypt pretty quickly. Would have gotten into Egypt well before the 2nd century. And since 2007, this has been on permanent display at a library, I believe, in the United Kingdom, but I'm not positive about that. And then the Magdalene papyrus, and this is a portion of Matthew chapter 26. Now, this might be older than the John Ryland papyrus. This could be back to as early as AD 66. Now, there's controversy about this. That's why I'm hedging on it. This could have been produced sometime between AD 66 and 99. Now, if that date were accurate and we could conclusively prove that this got back to the 1st century, I've wondered about the possibility of whoever made this copy actually had Matthew's original in their hands. So they've got Matthew's original here and they're making their copy. Possible. Maybe the odds are minuscule, but makes an interesting thought and maybe even some interesting discussion that you can have. And this is housed in the Magdalen College at Oxford University in Great Britain. And here's some close-ups of the 3 pieces. And then another key manuscript is the Bodmer papyri. These are a group of 22 papyri, and that's the plural of papyrus, by the way, discovered in Egypt in 1952. And named after Martin Bodmer, who purchased them. And there's quite a bit, I believe this is all of John's Gospel. Yeah, all of the passages here come out of the Gospel of John. It's one of the oldest New Testament samples that we have, and it dates from about AD 200. And so that would have been within about 100 years, 110 years or so of John writing. If John wrote around 90 AD, if he wrote earlier, then it might be a little be older than that. Now, these next 4 slides are from the Chester Beatty Papyri, and Sir Alfred Chester Beatty was an American and British mining magnate and philanthropist, very successful businessman of his generation. He once was given the epithet of the King of Copper, in reference to his fortune. He was a naturalized citizen since 1933, was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1954, and became an honorary citizen of Ireland in 1957. When he died, his estate was valued at 7 million Irish pounds. Now, that's a huge fortune in those days. The Irish pound, though, became obsolete in 1999 in favor of the euro, so I'm not real sure how much that would be today. My best guess is, just looking at some websites and doing a little conversion, my best guess is it would be something like 140 million British pounds today, so probably a little over $200 million to 230 or 40 million American dollars. And in fact, when he died, he was given a state funeral by the Irish government, the first private citizen in Irish history to get such an honor. And this is a portion of the Gospel of Luke. This is P45, that is Papyri 45 and Folio 13 and 14, just part of the Gospel of Luke. What I don't have is the book, chapter, and verse references to it. Now, these are housed in a museum in Dublin, the Beatty Museum. I think it's just called the Chester Beatty, actually, now. And he's got a very large collection of ancient documents, not just related to Christianity, but other religions and other countries. And this is a part of Deuteronomy. You can't see it real well, but over here on the left side of the screen, this is like a little ruler. I can't see the measurements. I'm not sure if they're metric or if they're English, but you can still see that these are pretty small fragments from the book of Deuteronomy. And that's from the Charles Beatty or Chester Beatty collection. And who was an Assyrian Christian living in the 2nd century and a student of Justin Martyr. He wrote what is believed to be the first harmony of the Gospels. That is, he took Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and put them together and lined them up so you could see the harmony of them. And then this is an Arabic diets. I tried to pronounce that and I keep stumbling over it. But anyway, it was translated from Syriac to Arabic in the 11th century. And in color, this is some pretty detailed work here. It's hard to see because this is a black and white picture, and on the screen sometimes it's hard to see. But the artwork here is actually very good. And then Codex Vaticanus, you might have heard of this, a 4th century manuscript of the Greek Bible containing a majority of the Greek Old Testament and of the New Testament. And it's one of the great finds. And it gets its name because, well, it's in the Vatican Library. It's been dated to about the 4th century. And it became known to Western scholars as a result of some correspondence between a Catholic theologian and the prefect of the Vatican Library late in the 15th century. It had been kind of just put aside on the shelf like a lot of books get and kind of forgotten about. And then Codex Sinaiticus gets its name from Sinai, and these are all Latinized titles. 4th century Christian manuscript, again, of the Greek Bible. It's got a majority of the Greek Old Testament, including the Apocrypha and the Greek New Testament, the books of the Epistle of Barnabas and Shepherd of Hermes, which were not accepted as inspired by the early church, and that's another discussion for another time. And this is considered one of the most important Greek texts in the New Testament, along with the Codex Vaticanus. And then Codex Alexandrinus, it's been dated to about the 5th century AD, and contains a majority of the Greek Old Testament and New Testament. Again, this is one of the very important finds. Came out of Alexandria, Egypt. Alexander the Great liked to go around naming cities after himself. A little bit of an ego, I think. But he also liked to take the great works of literature, cultural, religious, whatever, of countries that he conquered and translate them into Greek. So he had the Hebrew Old Testament translated into Greek too. That's about 250 or so BC. How do these New Testament documents compare to other ancient books? You know, a stack of existing manuscripts from the average classical writer would measure about 4 feet high, but the New Testament manuscripts would go about a mile high, much higher than that. Here's what I mean. You can see here Herodotus up here, where this arrow is. He was a Greek historian. In fact, some consider him the father of modern history. So if you didn't like history class, here's the guy to blame. He was also a geographer, and the city where he was born was actually part of the Persian Empire then. It's now part of Turkey. And he gave what is the first detailed account of the Greco-Persian Wars. The Greeks and the Persians went at it quite a bit in those days, and he was the first writer to perform any sort of investigation into historical events, any sort of systemic investigation, and getting the various sources and things like that. And then about the same time he lived was this guy, I cannot pronounce his name, but it's right under him on the chart. And notice they lived at about the same time. They were contemporaries, and so they both died around 425, 400 BC. The earliest known copy of either of their writings is from 900 AD. So in other words, we don't have their original manuscripts. We have copies, but the closest copy is 1,300 years removed from the original writing. We've only got 8 copies of Herodotus's work, and not sure how many copies we have of the other guy here. And then Aristotle, who, if memory serves me right, was the tutor to Alexander the Great. Here's 384 to 322 BC is when he lived and wrote. But there's an 1100 year, or rather 1100 AD is the earliest copy of his writings. That's about a 1400 year gap. We've only got 5 known copies of his writings. And then here's some other Caesars, Pliny, and then these other 2. And then we come down here to the Bible manuscripts. The Magdalene one that I mentioned, quite possibly written in the 1st century between excuse me, I got that backwards. The 1st century, the writing of the biblical manuscripts. So here's the Magdalene manuscript. When we're getting into the biblical manuscripts here, Matthew wrote in the 1st century, about 50 to 60 AD. It's possible that this was coexistent. In other words, written at about the same time or shortly after. And then the Rylands papyri that we looked at, John wrote probably around 90 AD, could have been earlier. And the reason we think a lot of that could have been earlier, and we give the early date for the New Testament, is because none of them mention the destruction of Jerusalem, which was a fairly significant event, other than Matthew, who mentions it in the future tense, but none of them ever mention it as already having happened. So that's one of the reasons we think that the New Testament, most of it was completed before 70 AD. But again, there's some debate about that. John, if we take the 90 AD and then the Rylands papyri from 130 AD, that's only a 40-year gap between the original and the earliest known copy. And here's some others that we have that go back to within 100 years or so of the original writing, much closer than what we have from these secular sources. So if you got any questions, comments, thoughts, leave them in the comment section below, or you can send them to us at eastparkcfc@gmail.com. And you can send us your questions if you have a request of a topic you'd like us to cover, a Bible-related topic that you'd like us to cover on these videos. Send it to us, eastparkcfc@gmail.com. We'll be glad to put those in a future video, might even address them on a Sunday sermon. That's all we have for this video. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next video, and I'm out.